Welcome everyone to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter, that is Tara. We are going to talk about the Twilight Zone Season 4 Episode 11, which is called what, Tara?
Parallel.
See, Tara seems to think it's funny the way I pronounce the word parallel, but apparently she's literally in a fit of giggles waiting for me to say the word.
Because every time you say it, even the last Twilight Zone we recorded, because you had to say the name of the next episode. It just seems like a difficult word for a Scotsman, that's all.
Parallel.
Okay, you're really trying. That is not the way you pronounce it, and you know it.
Parallel realities. There you go. Anyway.
Parallel. I'll say it like a Scotsman. Parallel.
That's not what I sound like. That sounds like a robot. This is downright offensive. How dare you? So yes, full spoilers for the episode. This is about an astronaut who's going up to orbit the Earth. Kind of a timely story in 1963 when this aired. Right in the middle of the space race and all that stuff. But he comes back down after blacking out to an Earth that's just slightly different than the one that he was. He meets people that he was expecting: his friend, his wife, his daughter. But there's just some details that are different, and he begins to suspect that he has went to a parallel universe. I'm glad you're enjoying yourself, Tara. What did you think of the parallel?
I think it's a good episode. I think it's definitely like the most stretched out episode that probably could have benefited from only being 30 minutes.
So glad you said this episode is so padded. Everything in it feels like it takes like 3 times as long to get to the point, because they're just milking it to get to that hour long.
I mean, the
time.
acting's fine and the premise is good, so like it's not like a chore to watch or anything, but it definitely would have been a much better episode if it was only 30 and you had like just some highlights of him going like, oh, that's weird, well, that's different, and then like the reaction of the family and stuff like that.
I think it's I think it's like an either or, right? I think the problem with this episode, because I think I was quite disappointed with this episode and I find it quite underwhelming, and I think the premise is obviously really good. I think one of two things had to happen. I think what's in the episode would be fine if it was condensed down to that 25-minute runtime and it was more rapid fire with what it was doing. I'd kind of accept most of it. I still have one kind of complaint about the ending, but we'll get to that when we're talking about it. Or if you're going to have it be this long, then they have to go further with the ideas. They have to actually start going into the more interesting elements of it. And I felt like it kept just doing the most basic version of everything and not going far enough with it. For example, late on in the episode, when the military or whoever are analysing the ship that he came down in, which was already landed kind of weird because he didn't go in the water, he just landed. It's meant to be like a like a space shuttle that lands back in the water with parachutes, and that's how it lands. You don't just land it like a plane or anything like that, but somehow he was just on the ground without a dent. It was just like it's like it had landed. So it was already kind of weird, but towards the end of the episode there's like a scene where like some general's like talking to like an engineer, and he's like, wait, so what's weird about this? Like, this isn't the ship we sent him up in. Like, it's slightly different. It's mostly the same, but there's just these little differences. And I almost was like, this is a whole plot where they suspect he's like an invader or an intruder, or he's like lying about who he is, or they think he's a shapeshifter, or they could go in a million directions with it. But it basically doesn't go any further than that scene, because then it's time to just kind of like decide the episode's over and have him.
It's just an excuse to bring him back to the landing pad or whatever it is, the launch bay, to examine the ship with them.
That was the big example that stuck out to me.
Even still, like when he actually goes back, it just does a little fade, like the waves roll doodly doodly doodly, and it's so like it's just not very interesting.
That was
it's just like, oh, nothing happened. It's just a blip.
When I said that I had a complaint about the ending that would have still been there, even if it had been like tightened up and shortened out to 25 minutes, that is what I'm talking about. I think this idea that it was like he almost just dreamed it when he was like blacking out in his ship, because he sort of wakes up in his ship and he's still in orbit and he has to go down. I'm like, no, what made this interesting was the idea that there was a counterpart of him who landed on his Earth and like so like if he's going to just like snap back to his own reality, I'll accept that to a point. But this idea that it all happened in this like 6-hour window when he was still in orbit, and there wasn't like another version of him on, like, what I had thought would have been more interesting of an ending is if he like woke up back on his own Earth, but what we'd been seeing happen to him on this Earth 2, for the lack of a better term, had been happening on Earth 1. So he wakes up
with a different guy.
Yeah. So everyone around him was being suspicious of him. But then maybe, because to set up this idea that the daughter can tell that he's not right, so maybe have his daughter come in and say, "Oh, it's my dad, he's back." And then have that be how everyone realizes, oh, it's like our version of this dude's back now. And that could be your ending. That would be way more interesting to me than it was kind of a dream.
I kept thinking that because he kept saying, well, who's the president? And they confirm it's Kennedy, and then he's, oh, fine, I'm back on my own Earth. I kept waiting for the next reveal that he wasn't actually back on his Earth. It was just an additional parallel universe, like a multiverse thing.
It was a different Kennedy, yeah.
Yeah, like it was Robert Kennedy or something who, was assassinated in our universe.
Yes. Yeah, because that's one of the big things. Because that was actually the other thing that kind of bugged me. Is the first thing that's different that he notices when he goes home is that there's a fence around his house, and I'm like, this is the first sign that something's off. Is that there's a fence? I don't know.
I mean, if it's your own house, you would know if you had a fence or not, though. That's a big deal.
It felt like it didn't have much.
Did you have this installed while I was in space for 6 hours?
It felt like such a. Like, the way he sort of turned back and looked at it felt like it made it feel too much of a dramatic point, rather than, if it's going to be something that innocuous, it should just be kind of a weird sort of thing that you can shrug off. Mm-hmm. But this was, like, the way he looks back at it, and again, this is maybe them milking the runtime and trying to, like, make everything a big deal in the scene. It felt like it went on too long for it. It was just a fence. When it gets to something like, he mentions President Kennedy, and everyone's like, who the hell is Kennedy? What was he talking about? Like that's a bigger deal. That's like, okay, that's a big cataclysmic change in this world.
Yeah, or even when he kisses his wife and she realizes it's not him. I guess he just doesn't kiss like his parallel version of himself, or like the daughter recognizing that it's not her dad because he doesn't want 2 sugars in his coffee or something. It's that kind of stuff is a bigger deal. Plus the music, stings tell you it's a bigger deal too.
Yeah, and I think the defense thing is like, it's like you're I get the idea that you start with something small and ramp up, but wouldn't it have been way like more effective and creepier if he goes in, everything's normal until his daughter sees him, and his daughter's just scared to hug him? Like, wouldn't that be more of an effective, like, oh, what's going on here? Why is she scared of him? Like, that would be a bigger impact. It would do more with its reveals. This was kind of that's felt like to me, like, it has some of the ideas there, but this was very much what I think of a lot of 50s sci-fi, where there's good ideas, but it ultimately boils down to a lot of not great conversations in rooms with people, right? And conversations in rooms with people can be great, right? 12 Angry Men exists, like, it absolutely can be fantastic, but I don't necessarily think this actually hits at what's exciting about this premise that much.
Yeah, I think the whole, like, man's not meant to be in space, and we don't know what the consequences are for sending man outside the atmosphere, and that kind of fear that seems to be in quite a few episodes was done a lot better. I think it was called The Four of Us Are Dying. Yeah, the one about the astronauts who go up and come back, and they slowly start disappearing, and only the last person they spoke to remembers them. And everyone else acts like, no, they were always gone. That one was a lot better. And it's also creepier, like, it's definitely creepier. And yeah, so it's the same kind of like fear of the unknown, of, man pushing his boundaries.
I think my 2 points on what you just said is, one, that episode is creepier because I think if you're dealing with fear of space and the unknown, then it has to be like a cosmic horror where we can't comprehend what's happening, and that kind of effectively did that, where the other astronauts disappeared, and it was like, okay, this is just incomprehensible. I think with this premise is so much less incomprehensible, and it's very comprehensible. This is what excites me about this premise, is that it's all about the mechanics, and okay, what's all the little changes and what makes the world different because of these little changes. And I think the second point I'd make about this is that, yeah, this is maybe something that we're never fully going to like appreciate the feel that this or even that other episode you're mentioning is going for, because fundamentally we grew up in a time where people had already been to the moon and space travel had already, like, this idea of like the consequences of going into space. Like, we see space as a very dangerous thing to like do because it's a very, you know, like the one thing goes wrong and everyone's dead, and there's so many, you know, you're out there on your own in a vacuum. Like, it's very dangerous for a lot of reasons. But I think any generations that grew up after the 60s have probably got a very different perspective of what space travel is. Whereas at the time in the 60s, when they were just starting to go into space for the, you know, and doing orbits and things like that, like they are in this episode, it's like, oh, is there going to be some sort of like, you know, and maybe this is like a superstitious religious thing, but at the time, was there groups of people saying, oh, God wouldn't want us to do this, where we're treading where we shouldn't be going, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I think it's pretty easy, like, once you understand that time and that worry, to, you know, just sort of transpose yourself in that time as well when you watch the episode and be like, oh, they just didn't know yet. It's like reading a Jules Verne novel or something. Like, it was written over a century ago, so the science in it is not good, but it was really exciting at the time, and it's still an exciting read.
Yeah,
you know?
I think... Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think if the story was really well written, I wouldn't care about that. But I'm trying to play a little bit of devil's advocate for like some of the disconnect that I think I'm having with it, because you know, it's like if you go far back enough and you're looking at some of the earliest science fiction stories, you know, one of the first ever science fiction movies is A Trip to the Moon. And it's like people who go to the moon and there's like, you know, there's beings living on the moon, and that's ridiculous to us now because, like, of course there's no one on the moon. There's no life on the moon. Like, what are you talking about? But at the time, I'm sure that didn't feel that absurd. Yeah. Well, I've seen the Wallace and Gromit where they go to the moon and it is made of cheese. So factually, I think you'll find it is made of cheese.
I've not been there. Yeah, I don't know. Plus, the lunar landing is fake. Everyone knows that.
Hey. I mean, as a vegan, you must appreciate the moon as a natural resource for cheese that's not harming anyone. That's a great idea.
Let's go set up some mines.
Just mine cheese.
Yeah.
Well, that's the plot of that Wallace and Gromit short, is that they want cheese for the crackers. They run out of cheese, so they decide to go to the moon because that's easier than going to the store.
I've seen it.
It's good.
That's why I made the reference.
Yeah. So yeah, you know, it's I think a lot of the characters are very typical characters of this era. It's a lot of guys in suits, you know, talking about what's going on.
A lot of military people. Yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah,
family.
The idea of his wife and daughter, the Americana, all that stuff. Like, it's very typical, and that's probably the point, to sort of show, like, just how, like, take a very typical nuclear looking family and sort of insert this weirdness into it. But probably the most interesting it ever really got, as far as the characters, was when the wife actually kind of implied to the other military guy, the guy, you know, the main guy's best friend, although it's the alternate world, so it's, you know, not really his best friend, but would be his best friend. When the wife implies to him that she's actually kind of scared that she feels that there's a strange man in the house, and she can't explain it. She doesn't have any logical reason to say why this isn't her husband, because it looks like her husband. You know, he sounds like her husband, but he doesn't think he's the rank that he is. You know, that's one of the things that are different. He's a.
That sounds really creepy, and like it could be a really creepy episode.
That's could be a horror story, except the great trick of it is that the guy's innocent and he's not a villain. Like, he's as much a victim of this as anyone else is, but he's going to scare the crap out of his wife and daughter. If
they play it up like, you know, he's the alien that's come to observe this parallel universe, and then we're at the end, the twist is that no, he just needs to get back to his version of his family. That's all. That's off.
And that's the other thing. Like, nothing really triggers him going back. It just kind of.
It just happens. Yeah, that's kind of annoying.
Yeah, he just hears the voice. He hears the you know, like the comms as if they're talking to him still in the ship, and then. Like, so when it did the wave thing, I was like, really? It's just going to like snap back for no reason?
They're literally just waving it away.
Yeah. that was really frustrating, because it was all of a sudden, okay, you like, I thought this was stretched out and it wasn't like really getting into the interesting parts that I thought it had, but the fact that you're waving it away like this, and then there's a good like 10 minutes of the episode left when that happens, because we have to then do him like in the bed again talking to his superiors, and for some reason, he tells them about this alternate Earth when he could just keep his mouth shut because he knows it's going to sound crazy. If he's back home, then just be happy he's home, and just like, okay, I'll never mention that to anyone because I'll sound like a loony bin. But they do the little ambiguous thing where it's like, hey, it's kind of weird, but those 6 hours he was missing, we picked up some comm chatter from someone who claimed to be like him, but an admiral or whatever the rank was.
Colonel,
yeah. It's like, wait, Colonel? Wait, did we just get like proof that he might be right? And I'm like, is that enough? Really? Is that really enough? Like one bit of chatter? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It would have been nice to have something a bit more dreadful at the end. I don't know. Since the episode was just kind of quaint the whole way through, and lacking the kind of dread that we wanted from it. Like maybe if like the other counterpart was there the whole time, that would have been cool. Or like if the wife accepts his counterpart and he's been living his life for the last 6 days, or I don't know, something else. Like,
yeah, I think a modern version of this might like have cut to the counterpart on his Earth. It's, maybe not. I wouldn't have said we'd go back and forth because it'd be too similar to each other. But I think if you did something like 2/3 through, where to shake it up, you jumped over to the other person and showed them on his Earth and sort of showed how that's like changing things there. Like
everything seems normal except he's an assassin also. He's the reason Kennedy's not president.
Joe bugged me at the end actually as well, is that one of the final scenes is like, okay, so it's the two military guys out in the hospital hallway after they've talked to him, and it mirrors a scene that they had earlier on in the other Earth where they were talking to him as well in the hospital. But they come out and they're saying, well, is he crazy? What is this? Like, I don't know. And then the guy runs in and tells him about hearing this stuff over the comms and how it maybe proves that he's kind of right. It reminded me a lot of, I'm trying to remember the episode. It was the episode, I think it was the one where the guy was with the plane, and at the end of the episode you find out it was all in his head, and there's like a scene at the end where the two doctors or whoever it is like explain the plot to us in the hospital hallway. And it almost felt like it was the exact same set. It probably isn't, but it felt like it was.
Yeah, maybe it is. But you're right. It is like that. I forgot about that episode. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that scene also kind of bugged me just because the friend tells the other guy in charge, the general, that, since there's evidence now that his story is true, he's going to go and tell him about it so that he knows. And the general's just like, yeah, go ahead. And I kept thinking like, wait, this is like the biggest news ever. Maybe like keep it super top secret from everybody involved, and then have a committee decide when it's time to tell him.
Admittedly, the way he's portrayed in the episode, I don't think it would have been that exciting. But in theory, if they'd really made me care about this, and like he really wanted to be believed that this happened to him because for some reason he really cared, like I should want to see him find out that he's right. Like him getting proof, him having his friends saying, no, there's proof that you're right, we believe you. That should be a big like moment for him. That should be a big scene, but we don't even see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could leave his reaction out of it if the other people had a more interesting reaction of like, this is literally the biggest news that has ever happened.
And instead it's kind of like,
we're going to go to war with our parallel universe now.
Yeah, instead it's kind of like they just like, oh, that key I misplaced, we found it. Oh, good. That's the tone of the scene.
Yeah. Go let him know that you found it. Yeah.
That's the tone of it. You know.
Jolly good then. Carry on.
Yeah, I found myself really underwhelmed by this one, and I really liked the concept. I was excited about it when we reread what was next last time because it's my type of plot. But I felt like it didn't go far enough with any of its ideas, at least for my taste. And some people are going to say, "Oh, be kind to it. It's the Twilight Zone. It's from this time period where it hadn't been explored that much before." But here's the thing, though. A lot of these episodes of Twilight Zone have been so good and ahead of their time that's not been a problem. So I think it's fair to critique when one of them doesn't feel like it goes far enough.
They did churn out a lot of episodes in a very short period of time.
Yeah.
There's bound to be some duds.
So,
although I don't dislike this episode, but I do agree that it's disappointing.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was a terrible episode, but I we don't rate them out of 10, but if I was, like, it'd be getting a middling grade because ultimately I'm just kind of like, that's fine. Like. But I was hoping for a good one.
I think that it could have been good if it was a half-hour one, because I think the premise is all right. But anyway.
I think this more condensed, or actually going further with the ideas in a way that didn't just feel like the characters were, I don't know, just hand-waving things in like, ways. It just, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the best parts were just the reaction of the mom and the kid when they were suspicious, and that was
absolutely, I agree.
pretty. That's not a lot of the episode, honestly. It could have been more.
Yeah, and then it committed the sin of just having him snap back with a wave. Yeah. That just straight up sucked. So, like, it'd have been nice if something motivated it, like. And, it wouldn't have to explain it to us why he's going back, but something that we could actually, I don't know, read into or say, oh, it's kind of like the universe is trying to correct itself because it's realized it swapped them over or something like, whatever. Like, maybe it's because maybe they put him in a position where he should know something, but because he can't answer, so the universe like starts to correct itself or something, because it's like, oh shit, like, He can't be here because he doesn't know this like key task, like kind of like almost like a Quantum Leap style thing where it's like, wait a minute, he's not right for this role, shit. Or hell, you do a Quantum Leap thing, you have him like solve something that only he can only solve because he's not the person who's usually here, because he's that little bit different. He'll make a different choice, and that'll save his family or something, and then he'll snap back.
Yeah, because he was a major and not a colonel.
Yes. So I don't know. I just anything to tantalize my brain a little bit more than it did would have been nice.
I agree. Yeah.
So yeah, that's a shame. It's a shame I wasn't into this one too much.
We're getting a genie episode next time.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting because I mean they haven't done a ton of them necessarily. I mean, well. They've effectively done a lot of genie episodes, but there's only been one that I think was straight up addressed as a genie. I think it was like early season 2. There was an actual
couple.
Yeah, there was an actual genie episode.
Worked at the shop.
That said, though, there's a lot of ones with guardian angels or similar type characters that you could argue were just genies, effectively. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So, it's kind of like even the ones who come to say they're about to die, they're almost genie-esque as well in the way they're presented sometimes. But yeah, it's called I Dream of Jeannie, and it's a new writer. I only know that because Rod was like, welcome to the team. Excited about it. Yeah, he's like, welcome to the team.
We got a new guy. Everyone be nice in their letters.
Yeah, John Furia has joined the team, so we'll see how he does. I have to admit, I'm not inherently that excited for a Jeannie episode.
Well, because it's hard not to think of it as likely a comedy, because that's what they have been. And an hour-long comedy episode is a risk. That's a high risk.
It's a big risk.
But they did bring in a new writer, so maybe they were really impressed with the script.
Yeah, but it
sounds like he only has one wish from this trailer that we get, so it'll be a whole episode of him figuring out what his wish will be. I guess.
That was the other thing that made it feel like I feel like we've done this before. And it wasn't exactly a genie, but like I feel like this personality the genie has of this guy who's like smoking the cigar and is just like
he's got like a George Burns thing.
Yeah, I feel like we've done that type of like guardian angel style personality before, or something close to it.
Maybe I can't quite recall with the other ones, but maybe.
I don't know. Everything about what they showed of this made me just kind of feel like we're just sort of throwing some things together we've already done in the show, but maybe it'll be good, maybe it'll be well written and it won't matter, but
they hired this new guy, so, or at least they got him to write one script.
I mean, this episode I liked the sound of from last week or last episode, and I ended up not liking it that much, so hopefully this is the opposite where I don't like the premise that much but it ends up surprising me. That'd be nice. But yeah, I'm not feeling it going in, I'll say.
I'm skeptical as well, but I think, I don't know, I still like the show, so.
I still like the show too. Just because I'm skeptical of an episode doesn't mean I don't like the show. I know you don't like being negative. I know you want to keep an air of positivity about things.
I mean, yeah, I am excited to get a new episode that I haven't seen yet.
Okay, well, we'll get into I Dream of Jeannie next time. Let us know what you thought of the parallel.
It was great. That was a great one.
Sharp. Let us know what you think of the parallel in the comments below. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications. You can, of course, support us by hitting the super thanks button on YouTube, or if you want to support us on a regular basis and keep all the content coming, head over to patreon.com/MaileFuzzTV and get some bonuses for your trouble. But that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV in the Twilight Zone.